key witness in the Fani Willis misconduct case, testifying that he had no idea when the relationship started between Fani Willis and prosecutor Nathan Wade. It comes after Mike Roman, one of the defendants in Donald Trump's Georgia election interference case, accused Willis of benefiting financially from a personal romantic relationship with Nathan Wade. Willis and Wade did admit to their love affair, but say that there was no conflict of interest and no financial benefit at all to the DA. Let's bring in our executive editorial producer, John Santucci, also our contributor and former Georgia prosecutor, Chris Timmons, for more. A lot of people just kind of sitting back thinking, whoa, we are getting into the weeds here. A lot of lawyers, a lot of questions. But, Chris, bottom line, Bradley just keeps deflecting, and it doesn't look like anyone's getting what they want to hear, and that is about a specific timeline that he knew about that would cause a conflict of interest between these two.
Exactly, Carrie. You hit the nail on the head, and that's really what this hearing is about, is when did they have that relationship? I think what we saw was pretty decent impeachment, meaning that they showed that Terrence Bradley may not be worthy of belief, but that's not the exact same thing as what you're talking about earlier, which is showing that timeline, showing when the relationship began. And then ultimately, we've got to get back to the issue of conflict of interest. I mean, the defense's theory in this case is that Fani Willis built this case that she could have a romantic entanglement with Nathan Wade. And so we haven't heard any evidence along the lines of when that timeline started, when they began dating. All we heard so far today is a lot of Terrence Bradley evading questions, which does call into question his credibility, but it doesn't establish that timeline that the defense wants so badly to establish, Kira.
So, bottom line, John Santucci, I mean, clearly Trump lawyers would be thrilled to see this case get thrown out, to see Fani Willis get thrown out, for all this to come out and basically blow up their case because of a conflict of interest. But so far, doesn't look to be heading that way.
No, listen, the name of the game here, Kira, is they want to delay and then make this all go away. It's not going to happen, clearly, based on today, because you saw Ashleigh Merchant, who was one of the lawyers that brought this case. So she represents Mike Roman, who's one of the original 19 that were indicted alongside Donald Trump. She struggled, really, for almost over an hour trying to get anywhere. I mean, even the fact that we were arguing about a text message. I mean, Kira, how many times did you hear the word text message over the course of an hour during those proceedings? And we still didn't learn much to do about nothing. But the reality is that then we saw Steve Sadow, who I'll tell you, Kira, in real time, other attorneys have been texting me that are a part of this case saying, please let Steve take over, because Sadow was the attorney, Kira. You'll remember we were on the air with you about 2 weeks ago that got that information from Fani Willis's one-time best friend about the relationship when it began. Sadow targeted in very effectively with that witness. Now today, and a little bit of what Chris just hit on with you, that didn't happen. Nobody's really been able to break through glass with Terrence Bradley because of the fact that they're being very specific about the timeline. And Bradley said repeatedly, I don't know. Now, the other thing we should just note for everybody is that if, in a very small possibility of the world, I don't think it's going to happen, I think Chris would agree with me, that Fani Willis or Nathan Wade are for some reason removed from this case, what does it mean? It just means delay, and that really comes down to it. It's not going to go away, but if you delay it close enough to the election, Kira, you get to use Donald Trump's favorite words, election interference.
And Chris, it's a good point. I mean, even if Nathan Wade and Fani Willis get pulled off this case, it doesn't completely go away. What would that look like? Let's say that does happen. What happens to this interference case where she's going after Trump?
Well, Kara, John's absolutely right. What it does is it delays the case, and it plays into their I guess, their strategy of trying to delay this case, just like John just talked about. But what would happen from this point is the case would go to what's called the Prosecuting Attorneys Council of Georgia. It's a quasi-state agency. It's run by the prosecutors in the state of Georgia. They elect the council. It has an executive director. The executive director's name is Pete Skandalakis. And so what would happen as of 2022, and of course we're in 2024 at this point, is that the case would go to Pete Skandalakis and he would appoint somebody to be the prosecutor in the case. Now, it's not going to be an involuntary situation where he looks around at the district attorneys and says, you're it. They've got to volunteer for it. I think it's going to be a difficult decision. I mean, you heard, Kira, exactly what was going on with Fani Willis, the death threats that she got, the paint that was on the side of her house. And so for a district attorney to step up, it's going to be a big burden on them, both professionally and personally. The person I think would be most likely to take the case is Flynn Brody out of Cobb County. He's a former military. I can't remember if he's an officer or enlisted, but certainly had spent a significant amount of time in the military. He is a veteran. He's also a Democrat. I could see Flynn Brody maybe saying it's his duty to move forward.
And Chris, you know a lot of these players. You've worked with them. You've been in courtrooms with them. What do you think so far of how the lawyers have performed?
I think John's right when it comes to Steve Sadow. I mean, he probably had the most effective cross-examination as of anybody. But as we saw, Terrence Bradley, did evade a number of questions. Was kind of, I hate to use the term, but what we refer to as a squirrely witness. He was kind of a squirrel when it came to answering those questions. And so I think John's absolutely right in that Sadow was the most effective. But what we got was an impeached witness, not necessarily any further ground.
And John, it's not just this case we're following. Isn't the Trump document case also happening this week? It's hard to keep track of all his various courtroom dramas.
But Kira, that's why you have me. So, look, we have the documents case later this week. So again, it's a dueling calendar, right? Because Friday morning, there's another motions hearing down in Florida. This is just a check-in, no cameras in court, so we're not going to get the theater that we have in Fulton County. But later in the day on Friday, many people were surprised when the judge added this hearing today, late last night. This was not on the calendar about 12 hours ago. So what Friday's hearing is going to be, many people speculate, is going to be basically closing arguments in this little trial, if you will, to disqualify the DA. Now, I think we'll get the rules of the road from the judge later on before they wrap up for the day, but that's our week. Let's not forget, Kira, I'm just going to check, what is it? Today's the 27th. We are less than a month away, March 25th. The first trial is going to start. We have that Manhattan criminal case that's getting underway. That's the hush money payments to Stormy Daniels, and that's going to look extremely different. No cameras in court, but Donald Trump, Kira, as you know, he has to sit in court for every day of that criminal procedure.
Meanwhile, Super Tuesday is next week.
Yeah, and you've got a primary tonight. I mean, it is the legitimate collision course of the campaign trail and the courthouse all over the country. I mean, to think that right after Super Tuesday, originally, we were going to have the January 6th special counsel case. That's been delayed because we're still waiting to see what the Supreme Court's going to do. Let's not forget about that. So to think that every week there is either somebody heading to a ballot box or somebody heading to a courthouse, that has become the norm of 2024.
So, Chris, let me ask you about this one moment. It kind of started off at the very beginning, and Merchant was asking Terrence Bradley about the signing of a contract, when Nathan Wade actually signed a contract with him to deal, I think it was with his divorce hearings. And then she was asking, when he was signing that contract, did you know about their personal relationship? Was she trying to get at possibly funds that Fani Willis was paying Nathan Wade, that those funds could have been used to pay Bradley in his divorce case? I mean, is that what she was going for, or was it more just about timeline? Because I was starting to wonder, as we've been talking about the money trail and conflict of interest, is it possible that the money Fani Willis was paying Nathan Wade, he was also using not just to go on vacation, but pay for his divorce lawyer?
I mean, that could be it, Kira. I'm not entirely sure. I think maybe your other theory is probably the more correct one, that she's trying to establish a timeline. Because if she can link, I mean, we know what date a contract was signed. We have the contract, we have the date on it, or at least I believe she's got that contract. And so if we know what that date is, and then he can find out what was going on in the relationship at that time, then she can relate the two back. But Terrence Bradley evaded pretty much every single question that she talked about. But you are right, Kira, in that what is at the heart of this matter is, when was the money coming in? And when did she earn it, and did it have anything to do with their relationship with, or when did he earn it, and did it have anything to do with this case?